"You've been lying to me for years," Melissa hissed, slapping the business magazine onto the coffee table between us. The cover featured me among 40 under 40 entrepreneurs with an estimated net worth that significantly contradicted the modest lifestyle I'd maintained throughout our 8-year marriage. Her eyes, once so familiar, now burned with a combination of rage and calculation. "All those years I struggled to make ends meet while you claimed your business was just getting by. All those budget discussions, all those sacrifices, and you were worth millions the entire time." She had ambushed me at my downtown apartment, having convinced the doorman we were still married. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, after I discovered her affair with my former business partner, an affair that had apparently been motivated by her belief that he had more financial potential than I did. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I want what's fair for the children," she continued, her voice shifting to the reasonable tone she used when negotiating. $500,000 in a trust fund for each of them. It's nothing to you according to this." She tapped the magazine cover. "Unless you're planning to deny your responsibilities as their father too," I maintained a neutral expression, carefully placing my coffee mug on the table. Those responsibilities hadn't concerned her when she'd moved 3 states away with her new boyfriend, limiting my visitation to 1 weekend a month. Nor had she mentioned them when refusing to put my name on Emma's birth certificate 5 years ago, despite my suspicions that I wasn't the biological father. Now, faced with the revelation of my actual financial status, the children had suddenly become her primary concern. "I've never denied my responsibilities, Melissa," I said calmly. "That's why I hired a private investigator 3 months ago. I have the DNA results for both children." Her face paled, the calculated confidence evaporating. "You did what?" I reached for the folder beside my chair. "We should discuss this calmly. I've made some decisions about the children that might surprise you. My name is Matthew Callahan, 39, founder and CEO of ArcTech Solutions, a cybersecurity firm I built from nothing into an industry leader over the past decade. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, the son of a factory worker and a school secretary, watching my parents struggle through layoffs, medical bills, and constant financial stress despite their relentless work ethic. Their experience taught me 2 critical lessons. Financial security requires both discipline and discretion, and a person's character is revealed not by what they have, but by how they respond to what they don't have. I met Melissa Parker during my company's early days, when I was working 80-hour weeks in a cramped office space above a dry cleaner in Chicago. She was beautiful, ambitious, working as a pharmaceutical sales representative with a designer wardrobe and expensive tastes that exceeded her income. We were opposites in many ways, my careful frugality against her spontaneous spending, my introspection against her social exuberance, but the attraction was immediate and intense. 8 months after our first date, we married in a ceremony. That represented our first significant compromise, modest by her standards, extravagant by mine. I paid for it entirely, drawing from business funds at a time when every dollar was critical for my company's growth. I didn't resent this. I wanted to make her happy, and I believed we were building a life together where such compromises would balance over time. During those early years, ArcTech operated in a precarious financial position typical of startups, with promising technology but uncertain market traction. I was transparent with Melissa about this reality, explaining that we needed to live conservatively until the business stabilized. What I didn't share was the significant interest my company had begun generating from venture capital firms impressed by our innovative approach to enterprise security. 6 months after our wedding, I secured Series A funding of $4.2 million. I told Melissa it was a small investment that would help us stay afloat but required careful management. In reality, it was a major validation of our business model, followed 18 months later by a $12 million Series B round that solidified my ownership stake at a valuation that placed my personal net worth above $10 million, on paper at least. My decision to maintain financial discretion wasn't about trust initially. It stemmed from my upbringing, where I'd learned that displaying wealth often attracted the wrong kind of attention and changed how people perceived you. I planned to discuss our improved circumstances with Melissa eventually, once the business demonstrated sustained success rather than speculative potential. But as months stretched into years, Melissa's spending habits and attitude toward money gave me pause. She treated every minor increase in our standard of living as an invitation to expand her expectations exponentially. Small bonuses, I shared, would disappear into shopping sprees rather than savings. Discussions about long-term financial planning inevitably devolved into immediate wants rather than future security. 3 years into our marriage, Melissa became pregnant with our son, Jason. The pregnancy was unexpected but welcome, shifting our priorities and temporarily pausing the financial tensions as we prepared for parenthood. I hoped this new responsibility would align our perspectives on security and planning. Instead, Melissa's expectations escalated further. Now we needed a larger house, a luxury SUV, private preschool funds. Meanwhile, Arctech had begun generating significant profits. I drew a reasonable salary, but reinvested most earnings back into the company's growth. Our personal finances remained comfortable but modest compared to what they could have been. I established separate investment accounts and trusts, building a financial foundation I planned to reveal once we had developed a more mature approach to wealth management as a couple. When Jason was 2, Melissa announced her second pregnancy. Emma was born 7 months later, a timing that raised questions in my mind, but which Melissa attributed to miscalculated dates. I chose to believe her, throwing myself into fatherhood, for both children equally, despite lingering doubts about Emma that I tried to suppress. The fractures in our marriage became more pronounced as the children grew. Melissa's resentment about our perceived financial limitations intensified, particularly as she compared our lifestyle to those of my business associates' families. What she couldn't see was that many of them were financing their extravagance through debt, while I was building substantial wealth through disciplined investment and controlled growth. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration, Arctech's 7th anniversary, and the completion of a major acquisition that substantially increased our market share. I came home early, planning to finally share the full extent of our financial position with Melissa as a precursor to implementing the comprehensive family wealth plan I developed with my advisors. Instead, I found her in our bedroom with Eric Lawson, my business partner since Arctech's founding. The betrayal was staggering, not just the infidelity, but the violation of both personal and professional trust. Their hasty explanations and apologies blurred together as I processed the implications of what I'd discovered. In the difficult conversations that followed, certain truths emerged. The affair had been ongoing for nearly 2 years. Eric had positioned himself as the real business mind behind Arctech's success, suggesting to Melissa that I was holding her back financially through mismanagement rather than conscious choice. He had painted himself as the better provider, the better future, leveraging her materialism to undermine our marriage. The divorce proceeded with surprising efficiency. Melissa, believing our assets were limited to our modest home, my declared salary and restricted stock options of uncertain value, accepted a settlement that reflected these apparent circumstances. She quickly relocated to Colorado with the children to begin a new life with Eric, who had resigned from Arctech with his own settlement agreement that included extensive non-compete and non-disclosure provisions. For 6 months I had maintained this new equilibrium, focusing on my business, adjusting to the limited parenting schedule, processing the betrayal privately rather than publicly. I hadn't corrected Melissa's misconceptions about my financial position, seeing no benefit in triggering a reassessment of the divorce terms when the children's well-being was adequately addressed through the existing support arrangements. Then came the magazine feature, a profile intended to highlight Arctech's innovative approach to cybersecurity had unexpectedly included estimates of my personal wealth following the company's successful expansion into international markets. While the numbers weren't entirely accurate, they were close enough to reveal that my net worth exceeded $30 million, a shocking revelation to anyone who believed my carefully maintained narrative of modest success. Melissa had obviously seen the opportunity immediately, arriving at my door within days of the magazine's publication with demands disguised as parental concern. The children, previously her leverage to limit my involvement, had suddenly become her justification for accessing my wealth. What she couldn't know was that her arrival coincided with the completion of my own investigation. The persistent questions about Emma's paternity had finally overcome my reluctance to seek definitive answers. The DNA tests had confirmed what I had long suspected. While Jason was indeed my biological son, Emma was not my daughter. The timing of the affair suggested Eric was likely her father, though I hadn't included him in the testing. This discovery had triggered profound reflection. While the biological truth about Emma was now clear, so was an equally important emotional truth. I had been her father in every way that mattered for 5 years. Her first steps, her first words, her personality and preferences, I had witnessed and influenced them all. Biology had initiated my relationship with Jason, but choice and commitment had defined my relationship with Emma. I found myself unwilling to sever that bond, despite the circumstances of her conception. Now, facing Melissa's financial demands, I had to determine how these discoveries would shape my response. The easy path would be confrontation, exposing the deception, challenging paternity, using this leverage to counter her demands. The more difficult path required rising above justified anger to focus on the children's long-term interests. What? DNA results, Melissa asked, her confident demeanor cracking. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted calmly. As the person who has been Emma's father since birth, I needed to understand the complete situation before making permanent decisions about her future. Melissa's expression cycled through shock, defensiveness, and calculation. It doesn't change anything legally. You're still listed as Jason's father. You've acted as Emma's father for years. I'm not looking to change anything legally, I said, opening the folder. I've made some decisions I'd like to discuss with you. I placed 3 documents on the table between us. First, I've established a trust for Jason with $2 million, structured to provide for his education and a foundation for his adult life, without creating the kind of wealth that undermines personal motivation. He'll have full access at 30 with provisions for educational expenses and healthcare before then. Melissa's eyes widened at the amount, 4 times what she had demanded. Before she could respond, I continued. Second, I've established an identical trust for Emma, with the same terms and amounts. I met her gaze directly. Biology doesn't determine family, Melissa. Commitment does. I've been Emma's father in every meaningful way for 5 years. I don't intend to stop now. Her expression softened momentarily before suspicion returned. And the third document? A revised custody agreement. I'm proposing equal time with both children, alternating weeks, with me covering all transportation costs. I'm prepared to open an office in Denver to make this arrangement feasible. This was the most significant change, a dramatic increase from my current limited visitation schedule. Melissa's reaction was immediate. That's impossible. The children are settled in Colorado. Their schools, their friends. Their father is equally important, I said firmly. They need both parents actively involved in their lives. I've consulted with developmental psychologists and education specialists. This arrangement provides stability while maintaining meaningful relationships with both of us. And if I refuse? Melissa's voice had a challenging edge. Then we present all the facts to a family court judge, including the DNA results, the circumstances of our divorce, and financial disclosures that would necessitate revisiting the entire settlement. I kept my tone matter-of-fact rather than threatening. I'd prefer to avoid that path. It benefits no one, especially the children. Melissa studied me for a long moment, reassessing the man she thought she had figured out years ago. You're different, she finally said. People often are when you see them clearly, I replied. Over the next few hours, we negotiated terms. Melissa initially pushed for larger trust amounts and less custodial time for me, but gradually recognized the fairness and child-centered approach of my proposal. By evening, we had reached an agreement in principle that served the children's interests, while acknowledging the realities of our situation. As she prepared to leave, Melissa paused at the door. Why did you hide your success for so long, even during our marriage? The question deserved an honest answer. I wanted to be valued for who I was, not what I had, I said. I grew up watching money change how people treated each other. I wanted our relationship to be built on something more fundamental. Would it have survived if I had known, she asked. I don't know, I admitted. But hiding it created its own problems. I've learned that selective transparency is still deception, even with good intentions. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry, not just for Eric, but for not seeing you, the real you, when I had the chance. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on the day's developments and the path forward. The solution wasn't perfect. Co-parenting across partial custody arrangements rarely is. But it prioritized what mattered most, the children's relationship with both parents and their long-term security, without the burden of excessive wealth or the damage of ongoing conflict. The implementation took time and adjustment. I opened the Denver office as planned, restructuring my work schedule to accommodate the new custody arrangement. The first transitions were awkward, the children confused by the new rhythm of moving between households. Over months, however, a new normal emerged. Jason thrived with the stability of the schedule and additional time with me. Emma, despite not being biologically mine, formed an even stronger bond with me, perhaps because my commitment to her was now a conscious choice, rather than a presumed obligation. Melissa adapted as well, gradually shifting from resentment to acceptance to something approaching gratitude. Our interactions, once tense with unspoken accusations, evolved into a functional partnership focused on parenting rather than past grievances. The financial security I had provided through the trusts allowed her to pursue further education and, ultimately, a more fulfilling career path than the sales position she had resented. A year after Melissa discovered my financial status, I invited her to meet for coffee during one of the custody transitions. The children were playing in a nearby park under the watchful eye of my assistant. I wanted to give you this, I said, sliding an envelope across the table. She opened it cautiously, then looked up in confusion at the stock certificates inside. What is this? 5% ownership in Arctech's parent company, I explained. It's not part of our agreement or any legal obligation. It's acknowledgement that despite how things ended, we built a family together. That has value. The shares are structured so they can only be sold to fund the children's future needs beyond what the trusts provide, or your retirement security. She stared at me, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time since I'd known her. When she finally spoke, her voice had shed its usual defensive edge. Why would you do this after everything that happened? Because holding on to anger takes more energy than moving forward, I said simply. And because I want our children to see that relationships can end without destroying the good that came from them. 2 years later, my life has found a new equilibrium. Arctech continues to thrive, though I've restructured my role to accommodate my parenting priorities. The children split their time between Denver and Chicago, adapting to the rhythm with the remarkable resilience children often demonstrate when provided stability and love. Melissa and I maintain a cordial relationship centered on co-parenting, the financial aspects of our interaction long since settled. I've begun dating again recently, approaching relationships with a commitment to transparency I didn't fully understand. The importance of before. When appropriate, I'm open about both my financial position and the complex family structure I maintain. This filters out those interested in wealth alone, while attracting people who value the same principles of integrity and commitment that guide my own life. The trusts for the children remain untouched, except for educational expenses, growing steadily. For their future needs without defining their present choices, I've established additional philanthropic foundations focusing on financial literacy and family support services, drawing on my own experiences to help others navigate complex family dynamics. My ex-wife was shocked when she discovered my hidden wealth after our divorce. When she demanded money for our children, including the daughter I had discovered wasn't biologically mine, I made an unexpected decision. Rather than using this revelation as leverage or punishment, I chose to secure both children's futures equally while establishing a more balanced presence in their lives. The path forward wasn't about vindication, but about breaking cycles of deception, including my own, and building something better from the fragments of what had broken. In the end, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the choices we make when those dollars could easily become weapons rather than tools for healing. The children don't know the full story yet. Those conversations will come when they're old enough to understand the complexities of adult relationships. But they do know they're loved unconditionally by both parents, and ultimately, that's the only balance sheet that truly matters.